It wasn't the cake that ruined my birthday. It wasn't even the moment I saw the candles already lit without me. It was the sound of laughter, the kind that sounds full until you realize it was built without your name in the guest list. I stood in the hallway, one hand still wrapped around the gift bag I had picked out for Ella last week. Something small, thoughtful. A silver necklace with a charm shaped like a sunflower, her favorite. I hadn't expected a parade. Just dinner, a seat, maybe a slice of cake with my name on it. Instead, I watched through the kitchen doorway as Denise leaned over the marble counter, giggling as she adjusted the charcuterie board. The cake sat beside her. Chocolate. 3 layers. Happy birthday spelled in pink cursive. But the name written underneath wasn't mine. It was hers. Ella's. My granddaughter. I blinked. I must have read it wrong. Today was my birthday, April 6th. I had gotten up early, made the beds, watered the garden, even ironed Jacob's shirt like always. I had smiled when Denise handed me the grocery list without looking. And I had smiled still when Ella asked if she could borrow my car to pick something up downtown. Never mind that the tank was already full, that I had already run errands for the week. And now here I stood, at my own kitchen's threshold. No one had seen me yet. No one turned to acknowledge the quiet footsteps of the woman who had lived in this house for 5 years. Not as a guest. As a mother. As a grandmother. As the woman who cooked every holiday meal, who crocheted that couch throw Ella liked to nap under. As the woman who had signed over half her retirement to help this house get remodeled after the flood. Denise clinked her wine glass against Jacob's. To Ella, she beamed, for being the heart of this house. Ella laughed. It's just a little party, Mom. And that's when I realized. This wasn't just a coincidence. This wasn't 2 birthdays being celebrated in the same month. This was a replacement. A substitution. A quiet swap of significance. I stepped inside. The click of my heels on the tile drew their attention like a stone dropped into water. Denise turned first. She had the audacity to smile. Oh, Lorraine, you're just in time. Would you mind checking the tea? I forgot to steep the chamomile. I stared at her, then to the cake again. Jacob's face didn't shift. He raised a brow, casual. Hey, Mom. Didn't know you were home. You didn't, I began, then stopped. I swallowed. Didn't know I was home? Ella was at the table, a present in her lap, the wrapping half-torn. She looked up at me and immediately looked down again. Denise followed my gaze, then cleared her throat. We just thought, since Ella's been so stressed about exams, a little birthday surprise would lift her spirits. The actual date didn't matter. The actual date is April 6th, I said softly. Today. Silence. Dense and tight. Denise's smile faltered. Right. I mean, technically. But you didn't say anything. Jacob put his fork down. Mom, don't make this weird. Weird. I had baked cakes for every one of Jacob's birthdays since he was 3. Even when he went away to college. I mailed care packages. Mailed muffins. Mailed gift cards. I had not missed one birthday call in 34 years. And I didn't say anything? I walked over to the table slowly, carefully, like my bones had gone hollow. I placed the gift bag down, gently, in front of Ella. She didn't look up. Her hands were frozen in her lap. This is for you, I said. I picked it out last week. I thought we'd be celebrating together. Denise stepped forward. Lorraine, it's not personal. It's just a quiet removal. A silent shift in orbit where I no longer existed at the center of this family, but hovered like a satellite, necessary when needed, invisible otherwise. I'll make some tea, I said quietly, moving toward the stove. They didn't stop me. Of course they didn't. Because service was the role they had carved for me. As I waited for the kettle, the laughter returned. Slightly more muted. But not for me. For each other. Jacob opened a bottle of wine. Denise unboxed another tray. Ella tore the rest of her gift. I stared at the flame beneath the kettle and thought about the first birthday I spent in this house. Walter had surprised me with breakfast in bed. Jacob had drawn a card in crayon. Mommy is magic. I didn't feel magic now. I felt used. and something deeper than grief began to burn at the edges of my ribs. Not anger, not sadness. Clarity. The kettle whistled. I poured the water, steeped the bag, and turned back toward them with the mug in my hand. "You forgot," I said softly. Denise looked up. "What?" "You forgot that I am not the help. I am not the furniture. I am not a ghost." Jacob sighed. "Come on, Mom. Don't ruin the mood." "No," I replied. "You already did." I walked over to the table and set the tea down, not in front of Denise, not in front of Ella, in front of my own chair. I sat. Quietly, deliberately. I will sit. I will drink this tea. And when I'm done, I will not clean up. I will not wash dishes. I will not tidy the wrapping paper or package leftovers or fold the napkins into perfect thirds. Not today. Jacob opened his mouth, then closed it again. Denise looked unsure whether to argue. Ella finally glanced up, her eyes glassy. "I was going to make a pie," I added. "Lemon meringue. Walter's favorite. Mine too. But it looks like you've got dessert covered." I sipped the tea. The chamomile was bitter. Oversteeped. Perfect. What they didn't know was that while they forgot my birthday, they also forgot something else. This house? It was never theirs. Not legally. Not emotionally. Not in spirit. Walter and I had bought this home in '89. His name's still on the deed. Mine too. Jacob's? Absent. And in my filing cabinet, tucked behind a folder labeled insurance, was a second envelope. It wasn't a gift. It was a reminder that their comfort had a cost. And starting tonight, the invoice was coming due. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. That night, long after the candles had been blown out and the cake reduced to a few slices left on the counter, I sat in my room alone. They never said happy birthday. Not once. I waited for it, naively maybe. Some small acknowledgement as I excused myself from the table, a passing, "Oh, Mom, by the way," or "Grandma, I almost forgot," but there was nothing. Just Denise asking if I could take the recycling out in the morning and Jacob fiddling with a thermostat as if nothing about this night had burned differently. I changed into my robe and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the vanity mirror. The lines around my mouth looked deeper. My hair, more silver than white. I looked like a woman who had spent her life holding others up. And now no one even remembered what day she was born. I opened the drawer and pulled out a small, leather-bound journal. Walter had given it to me the year before he passed. "For the words you never say out loud," he wrote on the inside cover. I hadn't opened it in 2 years. Tonight I did. And I wrote, April 6th. I was not wished a happy birthday today. Not even in passing. They gave Ella a party instead. In my house. With my cake plates. My candles. My linens. And they didn't think I would mind. But I did. Not because I expect much. I never have. But because I have given too much of myself to be forgotten this easily. I don't want revenge. But I will not be invisible anymore. Not in this house. Not in this life. I am writing this because I need to remember. They forgot my birthday. But I remember everything. I closed the journal and stared at the closet. In the back, beneath a folded quilt, was a fireproof box. I hadn't opened it in years. Not since Walter's funeral. I rose and knelt on the floor, hand steady, not shaking. The click of the lock was louder in the silence than I expected. Inside were important documents. Our marriage license, Walter's death certificate, the original deed to the house. I pulled it out and smoothed it on the bedspread. 2 names. Mine and Walter's. No Jacob. No Denise. I remembered the day we signed it. How proud we had been. How young. The agent had warned us that skipping a third-party name might make things harder down the line. I suppose this was down the line. Taped to the back of the folder was a letter I'd written 4 years ago. A just-in-case letter. For Jacob. For Ella. For whoever needed reminding. I had never intended to send it. But tonight something shifted. I peeled the tape, slid it from its envelope, and read it. To my family, if you are reading this, it means I no longer trust that love is enough to be seen. I have supported this household not only with time, meals, and money, but with presence. And presence is the most expensive thing we own. This house was never gifted to you. It was never a trade for gratitude. It is my home. And from now on, I will be treated as more than a spare part in your machine. Or you will find that machines break when you remove the piece holding it together. I loved you enough to stay silent for years. Now I love myself enough to speak. With clarity, Lorraine. It was not cruel. It was true. I slid the letter into a clean manila envelope and wrote "For when you forget" on the front. I placed it in my nightstand drawer. Not to be mailed, not yet. But I needed to know it was ready. The next morning, I didn't make breakfast. Not out of spite, out of choice. At 7:43, I heard the shuffle of footsteps in the kitchen. Cabinets opening. The sound of the microwave door slamming shut. Jacob's voice muttering something to Denise about no eggs. At 8:11, Ella knocked softly on my door. "Grandma," she called. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the window and let the breeze in. It was still my birthday. No one had mentioned it. So I celebrated quietly, making a cup of lavender tea and buttering a piece of toast with raspberry preserves, my favorite. I sat by the window, watching the sun rise over the garden I had planted 3 years ago. The daffodils were blooming. I had planted those myself. They remembered. At 10:02, Jacob knocked on the bedroom door. "Mom." Still, I said nothing. I was not punishing. I was pausing, giving them the silence they had long offered me in return. At noon, I put on my best blouse, the one Walter liked. I brushed my hair, applied a little rouge, and walked out the front door without a word. I left my phone on the charger. I walked downtown. I bought myself a single rose and placed it gently in my purse. Then I walked to the bank. I asked for a certified copy of the deed, just in case. Not because I wanted to start a war, but because I needed armor. When I returned at 3:30, Jacob was in the living room. Denise was folding laundry. Ella was upstairs. No one asked where I had gone. I liked it that way. I took the certified copy, placed it in the fireproof box with the original, and added a note. If they ask me to leave again, remind them I never arrived. I built this place. I live here. I stay. Then I made myself a cup of tea and waited. Because storms don't always come with thunder. Sometimes they come with a whisper and a page that says, "Enough." I didn't slam any doors. I didn't raise my voice. But something had shifted, and the silence in that house had a new sound to it. The sound of tension with nowhere to hide. By Monday morning, the dynamic had changed. Jacob still left for work at 7:15 a.m., as predictable as the mailman. But this time, he didn't ask if I'd start the laundry. Denise came down at 8:10, bleary-eyed and irritated that the coffee wasn't brewed. She muttered something about the filter being jammed. I sipped mine quietly at the table and offered no solution. Ella shuffled into the kitchen at 8:35 and opened the fridge. "Grandma, we're out of oat milk." I folded the newspaper with precision. "That's unfortunate." She blinked at me. "Can you get more?" I smiled politely. "You're old enough to drive. The store is 4 blocks away." She didn't respond. By 9 o'clock, Denise had opened the dishwasher, expecting it to be unloaded, only to find it exactly as she'd left it, full, clean, untouched. She muttered louder this time. "Something wrong?" I asked without looking up from my crossword. "No," she snapped. "Just things seem different lately." "They are," I replied. She stood there, dish towel in hand, like someone waiting for an apology that would never arrive. She didn't realize the apology belonged to me, and I was no longer interested in receiving it. That afternoon, while they were gone, I cleared the corkboard in the kitchen. I removed the weekly meal plans, the to-do lists, the calendar that used to include Lorraine, Ella's pickup, or Lorraine, doctor's appointment escort. I replaced it with a single sheet of crisp white paper. At the top, in bold handwriting, "Household agreements, effective immediately." Below, I listed 5 rules. I am no longer the default cook, cleaner, driver, or errand runner.
If you need help, ask.
If I'm available, I'll consider it. My time is not unlimited, nor is it free. If you use it, clean it. If you borrow it, return it. If you break it, fix it. Respect is the minimum. Gratitude is appreciated. Entitlement is not tolerated. This home is shared, not owed. And I am no longer invisible. I pinned it in the center of the board, neatly aligned. Then I took a step back and breathed. It wasn't a contract.
Not yet.
But it was a declaration. A shift. That evening, Jacob came home first. He walked past it at first without noticing, then circled back slowly. "What's this?" he asked, voice low. "A list," I said, stirring soup at the stove. He skimmed it. His eyes narrowed. "Is this, are you upset?" I tasted the broth. Needed more pepper. "I'm not upset," I said, adding a pinch. "I'm redefining the terms." The terms of what? Of my role, my presence, my boundaries. He looked like a man trying to solve a riddle that had no punchline. "You've never needed to spell things out before." "That was the problem," I replied. Before he could say more, Denise walked in. She froze mid-step, eyes snapping to the board. "You've got to be kidding." "No," I said calmly. "I'm not." She approached it like it was something offensive. "Lorraine, this feels digressive." "Interesting," I mused. "When you handed me a rental agreement over dinner last year, you called it setting healthy boundaries." Jacob winced. Denise flushed. "That was different. That was about fairness." "So is this." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She looked to Jacob, but he was already backing toward the hallway like a man trying not to be caught in the middle of a landmine. "Dinner will be ready in 10, I added, "if you'd like to join. If not, I'm sure DoorDash is still working." I served up 3 bowls of soup, plating them cleanly, evenly. But I didn't call them to the table. I sat down first. I waited. At 6:38, Ella came down, headphones around her neck. She paused at the kitchen entrance, saw the paper, and squinted. "What's going on?" "Rules," Denise muttered, pouring herself a glass of water. Ella walked closer, read them silently, then turned to me. "Is this because of the party?" I looked her in the eye. "It's because of everything."
She didn't argue.
She sat. Quietly. She picked up her spoon and took a bite. "This is good," she said softly. "The soup." "Thank you," I replied. Denise sat last, reluctantly. Jacob didn't come down at all. After dinner, I cleared only my own dish. No lecture. No sighing. No commentary. At 9:04 p.m., I received a text from Jacob. "I didn't realize you were this upset." I stared at the screen. I didn't reply. Because he was still missing the point. I wasn't upset. I was done. Done filling the empty spaces of their lives while being pushed to the margins of my own. Done waiting for acknowledgement like a child hoping for permission. The next morning, I rose early. I made a pot of coffee. Just enough for one. I opened the windows and played the old record Walter had loved, Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong, warm and steady. I planted a single tulip bulb in the front garden. Not because I expected anyone to notice it bloom, but because I would. It was Tuesday afternoon when I walked into the office of Mallory and Bryce, attorneys at law.
Small building.
White shutters. Red brick front. The kind of place people drove past without thinking twice. But I had passed it for 20 years on my weekly grocery trips. I knew they handled estates, wills, property disputes. I hadn't come here on impulse. I'd made the appointment 6 days earlier. On the night, I wrote in my journal and placed the letter in the drawer. A contingency plan. I stepped into the office and was greeted by a young man in a navy vest. "Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment?" "Yes," I said. "Lorraine Middleton. 2:30 with Ms. Bryce." He smiled, stood, and offered me a clipboard. "She'll be right with you." I filled out the form with a practiced hand.
Name.
Address. Primary concern, property clarification, and living arrangement terms. It sounded sterile on paper, but it wasn't. It was personal. It was everything. A few minutes later, A woman in her early 50s with salt-streaked hair and wireframe glasses called me into her office. "Lorraine, please have a seat. I understand you have a few documents you'd like reviewed." I nodded and handed her the manila folder, copies of the deed, tax documents, utility bills still in my name, and, at the very back, a notarized statement I'd written outlining my current living situation.
She took her time.
Read every line. She didn't speak until she had finished reading all 5 pages. When she finally looked up, she leaned back in her chair. "Well," she said, "you're not just a tenant. You're the owner." "I thought so," I said gently. "And from what I'm reading, they've been living in your home for years, contributing irregularly, with no formal lease or agreement." "Correct." She narrowed her eyes. "Lorraine, you're not just in the right. You're being incredibly patient." "That's generous," I said. "Some would call it foolish." She smiled. "Foolish is letting people treat you like wallpaper in your own house. This." She tapped the papers. "This is the beginning of structure. Control." She asked if I wanted to issue a formal notice. "No," I said. "Not yet. I want to give them a chance to realign before they self-destruct." Ms. Bryce leaned forward. "I respect that. So, what do you want from me?" "I'd like a lease agreement. One I can present to them with terms. Clear ones. Fair ones." "But my terms?" She nodded. "Rent. Yes. Utilities. Split 3 ways. And occupancy limitations? They can stay. But the upstairs bedroom becomes mine. From now on, they get the guest suite." She grinned. "You're serious?" "As a deed," I replied.
She drafted it as we talked.
Precise. Unemotional. There were no barbs, no jabs. Just terms. I reviewed each line. Added a few clauses, privacy hours, a shared chores agreement, and one final sentence. Violation of this agreement may result in a 30-day notice of termination of cohabitation. I signed the draft and requested 2 printed copies. On my way out, I paused at the front desk and pulled a small white envelope from my bag. Inside was a check. "For your time," I said. The young man behind the counter blinked. "Ma'am, you're not required to pay today." "I know," I said. "But I don't like owing anyone. Not anymore." That night, the house was unusually quiet. Dinner was leftovers. Denise barely touched her plate. Jacob avoided eye contact. Ella was upstairs. At 8:15, I placed the 2 lease copies inside a navy folder and walked into the living room. They were watching some detective show on mute, phones in hand. I turned off the TV. Jacob blinked. "Mom?" I set the folder on the coffee table between them. "Read it."
Carefully.
Denise scoffed. "What is this?" "Terms," I said. "Conditions. The new expectations for living in this house. Starting May 1st. Jacob picked it up slowly, brows furrowing. "There's a rent line." "Yes," I said. "And utilities. And bedroom assignments." Denise's voice sharpened. "You're giving us the guest room?" "I'm reclaiming my home," I replied. "You're welcome to stay. But under a real agreement this time. Just like you offered me once." Jacob opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "This isn't personal. It's overdue." Denise stood. "You can't be serious." "Actually," I said, looking her square in the eye, "I've never been more serious." She turned to Jacob. "You're not going to let her do this." He looked at me, then down at the paper again.
He didn't speak.
"This isn't a punishment," I said. "It's a mirror. Read it, sign it, and return it to me by the end of the week. If you'd prefer to move out, I'll give you 30 days. No hard feelings." Jacob finally looked up. What brought this on?" "Being forgotten," I said simply, and deciding not to forget myself in return. I walked away before they could say more. In the kitchen, I brewed a cup of peppermint tea, calm and slow. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't pound. This was not anger. This was equilibrium. The next morning, the folder was still on the table, untouched.
But the air had changed.
Jacob left for work, without saying goodbye. Denise didn't ask me to start the laundry. And Ella? She lingered on the stairs, backpack slung over one shoulder. Grandma? She asked quietly. Yes. Do you really want them to move out? I took a sip of my tea. I want to stop being treated like I don't exist. She nodded, quietly,
Thoughtfully.
and then she said the first real thing anyone had said to me in days. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Not because I was cold, because I wanted her to feel the power of silence used not to punish, but to make space for reflection. And for once, she stayed in it. I found the photo while looking for a charger. Not for me, for Ella. She'd knocked softly on my door that morning, eyes rimmed with sleep, hair in a lopsided bun. Do you have a phone charger I can borrow?
I didn't sigh.
I didn't roll my eyes. I just nodded and pointed toward the cedar chest at the foot of the bed. Bottom drawer. Check there. She stepped in carefully, like she didn't want to break something. I watched from the armchair as she knelt down, opened the drawer, and rummaged through the neatly organized cords, notebooks, and old eyeglass cases. That's when she found it. A photograph. 5 by 7, slightly curled at the edges. A younger me, standing in front of the public library. Blue dress, red lipstick, a name badge pinned proudly to my chest. Grandma, she said slowly. Is this you? I nodded. I didn't know you worked at the library. I did. For 17 years. Her brows lifted. 17? Yes, I said, folding my hands. Until Walter got sick. She stood, photo still in her hand. You never told me that. I suppose no one ever asked. She looked down at it again. You look happy. I smiled softly. I was. She sat on the edge of the bed, still holding it, carefully now. Reverently. What did you do there? I ran story time, helped with the adult literacy program, curated the local history display. I even wrote book reviews for the town newsletter. Nothing grand, but it was mine. Ella nodded slowly, like she was fitting pieces of a puzzle she didn't know had been missing. She traced the edges of the photo. You should have told me. I tried, I said gently. But you were always busy. Or distracted. Or listening with half an ear. She didn't argue. Instead, she did something unexpected. She looked me in the eye and said, Can you tell me now? So I did. I told her about the man named Russell Whitmore who used to come in every Thursday for mystery novels. About the woman who'd learned to read at 65. About the book drives. The volunteers. The time I dressed up as Amelia Earhart for a kids program and accidentally set off the fire alarm with my fog machine. She laughed. Genuine and soft. Why'd you stop? Walter got sick, I repeated. Then Jacob lost his job. Then Ella was born. Life asked me to choose between roles. And I chose the one that served everyone else. Ella looked at the photo again. Then, quietly, Did you ever want to go back? I still do, I said. Sometimes. But dreams have an expiration date when no one helps you keep them alive. She set the photo down beside her. You're different lately, she said. Not cold. Just like someone who found a map and realized they've been walking in circles. I chuckled. That's not a bad way to put it. She hesitated, then added, I'm sorry about your birthday. I didn't know. I should have known. I tilted my head. That's not entirely your fault. But it is, she insisted. I've lived in this house all these years, and I never asked who you were before you were Grandma. I thought you didn't have a before. I nodded slowly. It's easier to accept help when you forget the helper had a life, I said. She was quiet a moment, then asked, Can I take this photo? Just for a while. You can keep it, I replied. But only if you promise to ask me about more of them. She smiled. Deal. That afternoon, I took a walk to the library. Not for nostalgia. For clarity. The building was mostly the same. New glass doors. Fresh signage. But the smell was identical. Old pages, polished wood, ink. Melissa, the new director, recognized me instantly. Lorraine Middleton, she gasped. I was hoping you'd come back one day. She hugged me tightly, like memory itself. I've been reading your old columns, she said. We keep them archived. The patrons still ask about you. Would you ever consider volunteering again? I blinked. Not because I was surprised, but because it had been so long since anyone asked what I wanted. I'd love that, I said. She smiled wide. There's a spot open on Thursday afternoons. Story time. I laughed. Full circle. When I returned home, I placed a note on the kitchen corkboard, just below the household agreement. Starting next week, I'll be volunteering at the library again. Thursdays, 1 to 4. I won't be available during that time. Please plan accordingly. Lorraine. At dinner, no one said a word about it, but Ellis stared at the note for a long time. And that was enough for now. Later that night, I found a new sticky note on my bedroom door. Grandma, if you ever want help scanning those old library stories, I can help. I've got editing software.
Ella.
I smiled and placed it inside my journal. A small olive branch. From a girl who once forgot I had a life, now beginning to understand I had one worth rediscovering. It started as a whisper, just a low rumble of clouds in the distance. The kind that makes you glance at the sky, but keep moving anyway. But by nightfall, the storm had arrived in full. A heavy downpour, sheets of rain slamming against the windows, wind howling like something old and angry. I lit a candle in the kitchen. The overhead lights flickered twice, then died. Denise's voice cut through the dark from the living room. Jacob, did we ever replace those batteries in the flashlight drawer? I thought you did, Jacob muttered. You said you were going to. All right. I'll check. I didn't offer help. I knew where the batteries were. I had organized that drawer myself 3 months ago, but I let them fumble. Let them feel what I had carried for years, the weight of always being the one who knows. I carried my candle through the hallway, its warm glow casting golden shapes on the walls. When I passed the thermostat, I noticed the power outage had reset it. The house would be cold by morning. I didn't mention it. Let the silence teach them what my voice no longer would. In the dining room, Ella was sitting cross-legged on the rug with her laptop open, but the screen was black. Wi-Fi's out, she said flatly. So's the power, I replied. She looked up at me. The candlelight made her face look younger.
Softer.
You okay? She asked. I almost laughed. Because I was. Strangely, there was something oddly comforting about the dark. Like the house had finally matched what I'd felt for so long. Unseen.
Quiet.
Until now. I'm fine, I said. Storms don't scare me. They scare me, she whispered. I sat down beside her. They used to scare your mother, too, I said. She'd hide in the closet with a book and a flashlight. She called it her story cave. Ella smiled faintly.
I didn't know that.
There's a lot you didn't know, I said gently. But you're asking now. That's something. Jacob returned from the hallway holding a half-working flashlight that flickered every few seconds like a weak heartbeat. Well, he said, looks like we'll have to make do. Denise trailed behind him, arms crossed, visibly agitated. I had a meeting scheduled at 9 a.m., she muttered. I hope the power's back by then. I rose from the rug and placed the candle on the table. You could always reschedule, I said calmly. She gave me a look. That's easy for you to say. You don't work. I turned slowly. Denise, I said, my voice steady. I've worked every day since I was 16. I've raised a son, built a home, managed a budget tighter than any company's. I've worked jobs where I was called sweetheart instead of ma'am and paid less than men half as competent. I've scrubbed this house from top to bottom, kept it running, fed you, clothed you, and made sure your daughter felt safe. She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. And do you know the hardest job of all? Being invisible while doing it. Jacob shifted his weight uncomfortably. Mom.
No, I said.
Let me finish. I stepped closer, not to intimidate, but to be seen. For years, I let you reduce me to convenience. A woman who was only visible when something needed folding, cooking, or fixing. But I'm done shrinking myself to make space for your comfort. Denise stared at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. Maybe she was. I don't need a trophy, I said. Or applause. I don't even need gratitude, though that would have been nice. I need truth. And this moment, with the lights out and the house cold and everyone forced to look at each other without the glow of screens or distraction, this is what truth looks like. Silence followed, except for the wind against the windows. Jacob cleared his throat. I think we've taken you for granted. That landed with a thud. Denise didn't nod. She didn't argue. She just stood there, blinking. Then Ella's voice broke through. I found your old journals, she said softly. In the chest. The one under the quilt. I turned to her slowly. I only read the one on top, she added quickly. I didn't know how much you gave. How much you lost. My heart ached. Not from betrayal, but from the weight of being rediscovered. Like a book someone finally pulled off the shelf after decades of dust. It's not too late to see you, is it? She asked. I looked at her. Really looked. This girl who had once held my hand to cross the street, who now looked at me not just as grandma, but as Lorraine. No, I whispered. It's not too late. The power returned just after midnight with a sudden buzz, a click, and a soft hum through the vents. But none of us moved to turn the lights on. We just stayed in the dining room, lit by the candles still flickering on the table. And for the first time in years, we all saw clearly without needing the lights. The envelope arrived on Thursday. No return address. Cream-colored paper. Heavy, like it carried something more than just ink and postage. I found it tucked between a pharmacy flyer and a political ad when I checked the mailbox after returning from the library. I nearly tossed it aside. But then I saw the handwriting, neat, slanted cursive that looked oddly familiar. Inside was a single folded letter. And a name I hadn't heard in nearly a decade. Russell Whitmore. My breath caught. Russell had been one of my regulars at the library. A quiet man. Lived alone. Spoke in short, deliberate sentences. He loved mystery novels with clever old women as detectives and always asked for the newest Agatha Christie reprints, even when we were out. I hadn't thought of him in years. He'd passed away, I remembered vaguely, not long after Walter. But the letter I held was recent. Dear Lorraine, I don't know if this will reach you, but I instructed my attorney to send it upon finalizing my affairs. Years ago, you offered me kindness when I had no reason to expect it. You brewed tea when I couldn't speak without stuttering. You slipped me that note in a copy of The Moving Finger that said, "Good minds are never truly alone." You were the only person in that town who looked me in the eyes without pity or expectation. I never forgot you. This house, modest as it is yours now. It's not in your name yet, but it will be. The paperwork is enclosed. The deed is signed. The attorney's contact information is at the bottom. I hope this place gives you the peace you once gave me. Warmly, R. Whitmore. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I sat down, the envelope trembling slightly in my hands. He had left me a house. An entire house. Not because I was family. Not because I had asked. But because I had once made a man feel like he mattered. That evening, I didn't tell anyone. Not Jacob. Not Denise. Not even Ella. I made dinner like I used to, rosemary chicken, roasted carrots, the kind of meal that fills a room with memory. But I only set one place at the table. Just for me. Jacob walked in around 6 and paused when he saw the solitary plate. No one else eating? He asked. They've already eaten. I replied without looking up. Denise brought takeout. Ella's upstairs with a frozen meal and headphones. He nodded slowly, as if understanding something larger than what I was saying. I cut a piece of chicken, savored it, because this time it was for me. The next morning, I made a call to the attorney listed in the letter. A woman named Naomi Fields answered. Calm voice. Confident. She confirmed everything. The property was located just 30 minutes away, small, 2-bedroom bungalow, near a public garden district. Russell had kept it pristine. No debts. No mortgage. I'm happy to meet you there for a tour, she offered. We're finalizing the transfer. All we need is your signature. That afternoon, I visited the house. It was beautiful in a quiet, unassuming way. Pale yellow exterior. Blue shutters. A garden out front blooming with early tulips and lavender that smelled like the books Russell used to borrow. The inside was sunlight and wood. A modest fireplace. Built-in bookshelves. A sunroom with a reading chair already waiting, its cushion worn but firm. And on the coffee table sat a single item, my old library note, framed under glass. Good minds are never truly alone. I sank into the chair and cried. Not loud sobs. Just quiet tears of disbelief, of relief, of being remembered when it felt like no one ever had. I signed the paperwork, not because I was leaving yet, but because I needed to know I could. That night, I returned to my room and opened my journal. I wrote, Russell gave me a house because I gave him a moment of dignity. My own family has given me a room and made me earn it every day. I don't want to leave out of spite. I want to leave because I have somewhere to go that's mine. Maybe I won't move tomorrow, but knowing I can has changed everything. The next morning, I found Ella in the kitchen, pouring cereal, barefoot and yawning. I watched her for a long moment and then I asked, Do you know how it feels to be remembered by a stranger when your own family forgets you? She looked up, confused. I told her about the letter, about Russell, about the house. Her spoon clinked against the bowl. He left you a house? She said slowly. Yes. Why? Because once I offered him kindness when I didn't have to, and that kindness stayed with him longer than most of the people in his life ever did. She nodded slowly, eyes wide with something between admiration and guilt. Are you going to move? I didn't answer right away. I haven't decided, I said. But I'm not waiting for someone else to give me permission. That evening, I walked into the living room and placed 3 envelopes on the coffee table. One for Jacob, one for Denise, one for Ella. Inside each was a simple note. There is a woman who lives in this house who gave everything you take for granted. She has a name,
A past.
and now she has options. Ask yourselves if she should have to choose between being respected and being present. I didn't stay to see them open it. I walked into the garden, watched the tulips sway in the wind, and wondered what it might feel like to set my own table where I didn't need to be invited. I left before sunrise. Not out of spite, not in secrecy, but because the morning felt like mine and I wanted to keep it that way. I packed only what mattered. My journals, a stack of old photographs, the floral china Walter gave me for our 10th anniversary, the sunflower necklace I'd originally bought for Ella but never gave her. It didn't feel like theft. It felt like reclamation. I left a note on the kitchen counter. I've gone to a place that remembers me without asking me to disappear first. This isn't goodbye. It's a beginning.
For me.
The spare keys are in the drawer. The name on the deed remains unchanged. But so does the truth. This was never yours to rewrite. Lorraine. Then I walked out the door and didn't look back. The drive to Russell's house, my house now, was quiet. Soft morning light spilled over the hills, as if blessing every mile. I rolled the windows down and let the wind tangle in my hair. It was the first time in years I wasn't headed toward someone else's need. I was heading toward my own peace. The house welcomed me like it knew who I was, like it had waited. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and stood in the middle of the living room with nothing but the echo of my own breath and a sense that something sacred had finally been restored. Freedom is rarely loud. Sometimes, it just sounds like a click as a door shuts behind you and stays shut. Back at the old house, I imagined the day began like any other until they read the note. Jacob called me at 7:30, 4 a.m. I let it ring. Denise followed with a text, then another. By 9 o'clock, 3 voicemails. Mom, where are you? We woke up and you were gone. Ella's worried. I'm worried. They didn't know where I was. And for once, they had to sit in that uncertainty. The same uncertainty I had lived in every day when they made me feel like a fixture, only useful when needed. I wasn't angry. I was free. That afternoon, I opened the windows and let the wind sweep through the new house. Then I did something small but profound. I made tea for one, set a table for one, a white plate, a linen napkin. a slice of lemon cake from the bakery down the road. My favorite. As I sat down, I looked out at the tiny backyard garden Russell had started. Lavender, rosemary, and what looked like an old apple tree leaning slightly to the left. I whispered aloud, "Thank you, Russell." Because he had seen me, a stranger, a woman on the other side of a library desk with kind eyes and no expectation. And now, this house, quiet, warm, and filled with morning sun, was the legacy of being remembered. Jacob showed up 2 days later. He knocked 3 times. Not hard, not frantic, just steady. I didn't answer right away. I let him wait. Let him feel what I had felt for years, the ache of wondering if someone will ever come to the door and say, "I see you." When I finally opened it, he looked older. Not just tired, worn.
Hi, he said.
"I wasn't sure you'd be here." "I am," I said. He looked around the small porch, took in the flower pots, the second chair, the scent of fresh lavender. "This is your place?" "It is." He nodded. "It's beautiful." "Thank you." A beat passed. "I didn't come to ask you to come back," he said quickly. "I came to say, I understand why you left." That stopped me. Not because it was surprising, but because it sounded real. "I read your note," he said. "All of them. Even the one in my lease folder I never signed. Denise, she was angry. But only because she's scared." Ella cried. "She should have cried sooner," I said. Not cruelly. Just honestly. He looked down at his shoes. "I took you for granted." "Yes," I said. "You did." "I thought the house ran on routine," he continued. "Groceries got bought. Beds got made. Life just flowed. But when you left, everything stopped. It didn't just feel quiet. It felt wrong." I let that land. "I don't expect forgiveness," he added. "But I needed to tell you that I'm not going to pretend anymore." I nodded. "That's a start." He pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet pouch. "What's that?" "It was in the drawer," he said. "The necklace. The sunflower one." I didn't give it to her. "I know. But Ella saw it. She asked if she could still give it back to you properly. If she could visit." I took the pouch slowly. Inside, the necklace shimmered like something both old and new. "Tell her she can," I said softly. "But she'll have to knock this time." He nodded. Then he stepped back. "Mom," he asked. "Yes. You were never just the heart of the house. You were the house." And with that, he left. No guilt. No demand. Just the truth. That evening, I lit a candle in the front window. Not for them. For me. To remember that I had chosen this life. That I had walked away without burning anything, except the belief that I had to be small to be loved. It came just after sunset. One knock. Not loud. Not hurried. Just enough to carry through the quiet of the house. I was in the kitchen, slicing a pear for dessert, listening to Ella Fitzgerald on the record player. I paused, wiped my hands, walked to the door. Through the glass, I saw her.
Ella.
Hood up, shoulders hunched against the spring chill. A potted plant cradled in her arms, a violet, I realized, half-bloomed and slightly wilted from the wind. I opened the door. "Hi," she said, voice small. "Hi," I replied. She looked around. "It's really nice here." "Thank you." She hesitated, then held out the plant. "I didn't know what to bring, but you like flowers, right?" I took it gently. "Violets. My mother's favorite." Her eyes lit up for a second. "Really?" "Yes." A beat passed. "Can I come in?" I nodded, stepped aside, and let her cross the threshold. She walked slowly, absorbing everything like it was sacred. The framed photograph of Walter on the mantel. The stack of books beside the reading chair. The tea kettle whistling gently in the background. "This place feels like you," she whispered. "It is me," I said, for the first time in a long while. She turned to me. "Grandma, I'm sorry." "I know. I don't just mean about the birthday. I mean about everything. I think I lived in a world where you were a constant and I treated you like furniture. Always there. Always sturdy. Never asked how you were built." I sat down in the armchair. She sat across from me on the couch. For once, The space between us wasn't filled with unspoken things. It was filled with the courage to speak them. I used to think of you as just Grandma, she said. The helper. The one who made pancakes. The one who drove me to practice. The one who stayed quiet when Mom snapped at you. I stayed silent. But now I know that wasn't fair. That I never asked what you wanted. What you gave up. What made you happy. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I wrote this for school. It's not graded yet. But I wanted you to have it. She handed it to me. At the top, printed in pencil. Essay prompt. Write about a woman who changed your life. I read her words slowly. She taught me that kindness doesn't always look like smiles and soft hands. Sometimes it looks like showing up when no one claps. Like cooking for people who forget your name was ever more than Mom or Grandma. She gave and gave until the walls of the house were built from her silence. And then, one day, she walked away, not with anger, but with grace. And the house fell silent. And I realized what we had lost. She changed my life not by what she did for me, but by what she finally stopped doing. I folded the paper, my fingers trembling.
Ella?
I'm not asking to move in, she said quickly. I'm not asking for you to go back. I just want to come here sometimes. To see who you really are. Tears rose in my throat. I'd like that, I whispered. She reached into her pocket again and pulled out the sunflower necklace, the one I'd bought her, and then quietly kept. I never wore it, she said. Not because I didn't like it. I didn't deserve it yet. She walked over, knelt beside my chair, and placed it in my hand. You should wear it, she said. It suits you. I held it between my fingers, the gold glinting softly in the lamplight. Sunflowers always turn to face the sun, I said. I'm trying, she whispered. I placed my hand on hers. Trying is enough for now. Later that night, I walked her to the door. She hugged me tight. No words. No apology-shaped compliments. Just warmth. As she stepped outside, she turned back once. Are you happy, Grandma? I looked around the home I had chosen. The home that chose me back. Yes, I said. I'm more than happy. I'm whole. She smiled and walked away into the night. I stood in the doorway for a long time after. Not because I was waiting for someone, but because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone left behind. I felt like someone just beginning. It was a Tuesday when I finally sat down to write the story. Not in my journal, not as a letter tucked in a drawer, but as a submission. Melissa from the library had mentioned a community anthology project, a collection of essays and stories written by local women, titled Roots and Windows. When she asked if I wanted to contribute, I almost said no. Then I realized I had spent most of my life writing my story in silence, with my hands, with my service, with every casserole and folded sheet and held breath. It was time to write it in ink. So I sat at the little desk in the sunroom, sunlight pooling across the pages, and began. I was the house. I wasn't the foundation. I wasn't the walls. I was the warmth, the hours, the presence,
The breath.
I was the reason it felt like home. And for years, I let others live in that truth without ever saying it aloud. Until the day they forgot my birthday. That was the day I remembered myself. I wrote for hours. Not just about the betrayal, but the reclamation. About the woman I had been. Caretaker, mother, cook, invisible seamstress of everyone's comfort. And the woman I had become. Author, volunteer, homeowner, keeper of her own peace. The anthology published 3 months later. My story was printed on pages 112 to 117. I didn't expect it to be noticed. Not widely, but it was. Strangers stopped me in the bakery to say, "Thank you for your words." A woman named Frances, widowed and 82, mailed me a handwritten letter that said, "You wrote the life I didn't know I was allowed to want." Melissa invited me to speak at the library's reading night. I wore a soft blue blouse and Walter's locket and stood in front of 50 folding chairs as I read aloud the closing paragraph of my piece. They thought I was the guest in their story, but I was the author all along. And now I write myself forward. Not to be remembered, but to remember myself. There was silence after I finished. Not out of awkwardness, but reverence. Then the room erupted in applause. I didn't cry. I smiled. Because I had never been so fully, so beautifully seen. 2 weeks later, I hosted my first official gathering in the backyard of Russell's house. I called it the Table Reclaimed. Not a dinner party. A restoration. 12 women came. Some old friends. Some new. One had been a nurse. Another, a teacher. One had run a bakery for 30 years and then closed it after her husband passed, convinced no one cared about her pies anymore. They brought stories. And salads. And wine that made us laugh too loud for a Tuesday night. We didn't wear name tags. We wore history. We wore resilience. We wore softness with armor underneath. And when we sat down at the long wooden table beneath the string lights I'd hung myself, we didn't talk about what we gave to others. We talked about what we were finally giving to ourselves. Jacob came by a week later. He didn't knock this time. He texted, "Can I come sit at your table too?" Not as a son, just as someone learning. I let him. He helped me water the garden. He didn't ask for tea. He made it. We sat in the sunroom. He handed me a folder. Inside was the signed transfer of the deed for the old house. "I want it to be yours alone," he said, "for when you decide what you want to do with it." I nodded. "I already have." The following month, the old house officially became the home of a new foundation, the Whitmore Center for Women in Transition. Named not after me, but after the man who reminded me what it felt like to be seen in silence. The rooms were renovated, the garden restored, and every hallway now had frames of the women who made the house what it once was. One of those photos was of me, standing in the kitchen, flour on my apron, laughing. A candid Ella had captured years ago and secretly restored. Below it, a brass plaque. The house felt like love because she lived in it. On the first anniversary of my move to Russell's house, Ella brought me lemon cake and 2 mugs of tea. "Do you miss it?" she asked. I shook my head. "No," I said, "because it's no longer about where I live. It's about who I am when I live there." She nodded, thoughtful. "You're not just grandma anymore." "I never was," I said with a smile. "But I'm glad you finally know that." That night, after she left, I lit a candle. Not for memory, for honor. And I wrote the final words in my journal, the one I had once hidden in silence. I spent so long making room for others that I forgot what it felt like to take up space. Now I sit at the head of my own table, not waiting for permission, not asking for a seat, but setting it for myself. And then I closed the book, because that chapter was done. And the woman who had been forgotten had become unforgettable. If this story touched you, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to remember that it's never too late to reclaim your place at the table.